Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. John said to Jesus, "Teacher, we saw someone driving out demons in your name. We tried to prevent him because he does not follow us." Jesus replied, "Do not prevent him. There is no one who performs a mighty deed in my name who can at the same time speak ill of me. For whoever is not against us is for us." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Normally give homilies about the responsorial psalm, but today's psalm says, "Those who love your law have great peace." And it struck me this morning because I've been reading a book about the Protestant Reformation. It's by an author named Brad Gregory. It's an author that I learned about as I was studying theology. He has this huge 600-page book called The Unintended Reformation. It's got over 100 pages of footnotes. And the book I'm reading is basically a popularized version of that very thick and dense book. It's called A Rebel in the Ranks, right? And it basically just tells the story of how the Reformation got started and how it happened. Right? And one of the things he points out in there is that the Reformation was never actually something that Martin Luther intended. Right? There's a famous theologian from the 20th century. His name was Karl Barth. He's maybe the most famous Protestant theologian of the 20th century. And he once made the analogy that Martin Luther was kind of like a blind man climbing a ladder. And as he fell off the ladder, he reached for something that he could grab a hold of, and little did he know, he was reaching for the church bell, right? And it let out this whole alarm that he never intended. And so this book is very interesting, talking about what happened, and it was never really intended. So if you were looking for a book to read about the Protestant Reformation, it's an excellent book that I would recommend. But it struck me this morning as I was reflecting on this, the great peace have they who love your law, right? That basically in the Protestant Reformation, what happened was Martin Luther, because of some of the corruption he saw, he started to take a stand against the ruling authority of the church. In other words, he made the mistake of thinking that just because somebody is corrupt doesn't mean we shouldn't follow what they are teaching with the proper authority. It's very similar to what Jesus told his disciples in the Gospels, right? Do not do what the Pharisees do, but listen to what they teach, because they sit on the seat, the cathedra of Moses. And if there's anything that really describes our whole modern age, the age that all of us are a part of, it's that same rebellion. That Martin Luther, because of some of the corruption he saw, he rebelled against the authority. He rebelled against the laws of the church. And so we see that in modern Christianity with this hesitancy for people to be a part of any particular denomination. People want to be spiritual, but they don't want to be bogged down by any religion, any religious authority. We see it in politics. That in our modern age, again, when people talk about politicians, they typically talk about them not with any sort of respect, right? But almost with a sarcasm, which of course oftentimes is merited. But just think about how most people think about governments. People want to rebel as much as possible against laws and against authorities. And now in our modern age, even with Catholics, we have people who claim to be Catholic, and yet you'll regularly hear people blatantly disregarding teachings of the church, or acting like they don't really matter. If there's anything that describes our modern age, it is this rebellion against laws, a rebellion against authority. And so how interesting it is that in the Psalms, the sacred scriptures, the law is not seen as a burden, but rather as a gift. The law gives peace. It's interesting, and I think it's significant for all of us to reflect on that in our own spiritual journeys, in our own spiritual lives. How do we look at the laws of the church? And how do we see the authoritative institutions that God has given us? Do we see them as a gift? When we think about the laws of the church or directions we are given, how do we see them? Do we see them as a gift? I think that's something we can all reflect on this morning.